It is a fitting monument to a religion that is divested with such tremendous power. It is also a fitting residence for their Dalai Lamas, whose soul is allegedly the perpetuated reincarnation of Buddha. The present Dalai Lama was born of peasant parents in an eastern province and was brought to Lhasa with great ceremony as heir to the throne of Tibet. Lhasa, just as the Buddhist religion dominates the life of the people. Under its gold-encrusted roofs are the tombs of the previous Dalai Lamas in jewel-studded sepulchres. The great road links the Potala winter.
And we knew nothing of the outside world. We were just so engrossed in our little pond, you know, so.
March 1959, the situation in Tibet was unending.
Bounds, and it stirs men's curiosity. What is this unknown country of monks and monasteries, with its god-king, the Dalai Lama?
This film tells the story of the unveiling of Tibet. But the Tibet that is revealed in this film is gone forever. In 1950, the Chinese invaded and swept away the old order. Now you'll never see the Tibet that 80 years ago so stirred men's curiosity. Then, concealed behind the Himalayas, Tibet was one mystery that the 19th century had left to the 20th to explore.
Was found while he was still a small child. In a tradition that dates back to the 17th century, the Dalai Lama, or Ocean of Wisdom, is both a spiritual and
population was largely centered outside the city of Lhasa in 2 or 3 great monasteries. The biggest
I lost my own country. You see, this is not just my life story, but it's many things you see involved. This kind of story can be helpful in dream.
for using bells on a horse or mule, for women not wearing a headdress, for the wearing of foreign shoes, or any other disorderly behaviour.
He had to go back to his post in Sikkim. He simply informed the Tibetan government that I would be staying on to deal with outstanding questions. And the Chinese didn't go, and we didn't go. Nobody.
The state oracle was frequently consulted. His prophecies were dark.
A powerful foe threatens our sacred land from the north and east. Our religion is in danger. The Dalai Lama, the incarnation of Chenrezig, patron god of Tibet, just 15 years old, patron god of Tibet, just 15 years old, was hurriedly declared of age. The old regent stepped down. On October the 7th, 1950, the Chinese attacked the Tibetan frontier in 6 places simultaneously and swept aside the little Tibetan army. Should the Dalai Lama stay or flee? The Tibetan government could...
Dalai Lama. The Chinese had managed to get a small mission into Lhasa, and...
The last of preliminary exams was some distance from Lhasa, at Ganden Monastery. Ironically, the examinations at Ganden proved to be a brief period of respite for Dalai Lama. But the abbots each had their own individual style of arguing. Was found while he was still a small child. In a tradition that dates back to the 17th century, the Dalai Lama, or Ocean of Wisdom, is both a spiritual and...
Foreigners were not welcome. Tibet was one of the last secret places on Earth, a mystery that the 19th century had left for the 20th to explore. It was their Buddhist religion the Tibetans wished to preserve from outside influences. This and their fragile independence.
The Dalai Lama was 22 years old. He took his last exams before being awarded his full religious attribution. He developed the same gesture with his hands to emphasize questions and answers. From monastery to monastery. Dalai Lama means ocean of wisdom. The last illusion that Tibet could...
is the annual cavalry show. For this occasion, the noble families must furnish 6 to 15 men and horses, depending on their official position. The riders must be appropriately armed, clothed, and mounted. This cavalry has no military function and is but another evidence of the Tibetans' love for tradition. These costumes are the very same ones that were used several hundred years ago by the men who protected their country. The appearance and performance of the participants at this contest are judged, and much of the sponsoring nobleman's prestige depends upon the results of this ceremony. the sponsors and cavalry officers. The following day, each rider, still heavily clothed and mounted on a small, fleet pony, races down the field course. At a full gallop, he must fire at the first target, then sling his matlock over his shoulder, haul out his bow and arrow, and try to register a bullseye on the second one. What Mecca
thinking.
Drepung Monastery had 10,000 resident monks. 8,000 of them were squeezed into the square to see the Dalai Lama as he arrived with his retinue to take his first exam. The monastery owned local estates.
Thoughts and how they lived. Tibetan society were always conscious that it had two aspects. One was the layman and the other was the monk. And the monks were the most important part of it. Well, Lhasa as a town was essentially a small...
Holiness would pose for us, this time on an outdoor throne, surrounded by flowers and members of his household. In the Dalai Lama's lap is a plaque, a symbol of office. Head of Lamaism. Of course, he can never marry. Tibetans believe that when their ruler...
Fighting broke out in eastern Tibet. Attacks on their religion had inflamed the people. The Chinese tried to be conciliatory, but Tibetan resistance grew. In 1958, a Chinese military post was annihilated within 25 miles of Lhasa. It was Jigme Norbu, a Tibetan official whose wife...
The whole of Lhasa had come to see the Dalai Lama off. On the banks of the Kichu River, hundreds of people burnt incense to wish His Holiness a safe journey. They were afraid he might never be allowed to return. We crossed
hidden land.
Clearly entitled to enjoy it. They had no wish to be liberated. The little Tibetan army was hurriedly reorganized under the supervision of a cabinet minister. Monks and officials were trained as officers. Clearly entitled to enjoy it. They had no wish to be liberated. The little Tibetan army was hurriedly reorganized under the supervision of a cabinet minister. Monks and officials were trained as officers. New regiments were raised and the richer classes called upon to furnish and equip another 1,000 men. Not only the material means of defense were mobilized.
Ruler of Tibet, he still had to prove that his religious knowledge made him worthy of office. For 3 months, the Dalai Lama was to be questioned and examined in each of the 3 great monasteries of Lhasa. For him, it was the culmination of 18 years